thing that you might have seen around the interwebs lately is a lot of people mentioning the giant spacing issue that Fluid Engine has on tablet-sized screens. I just wanted to take a minute to try to explain in layman's terms what's actually happening to cause that, and let you know that I suspect Squarespace is currently working on a solution. I have both seen it do this and not do this today. It's caused a lot of crashing in my tutorials for today as well, so I suspect that that is because they are currently working on this. This is a demo site that is in a different Squarespace account, so it doesn't have access to my Circle member perks. What I've done is I just opened this page in a new browser, and I've gone into inspect mode, clicked the device toolbar, and changed the pixel size to 750 because this is the last pixel width from edge to edge before it switches into the 8-column mobile view. So you notice I went 1 pixel down and look what happened. All this extra space is underneath that paragraph, and that's because everything rearranges for mobile, which we already know, but let's take a look at what that actually looks like behind the scenes. Hopefully in the next few weeks this won't even be a problem anymore. We have the grid expanded as wide as we can get it. We've got about 20 rows in this section. We have them touching, so we've removed all the extra space between the cells in the grid. We've selected the ellipsis and dragged it all the way down to 1, which is the smallest amount that we can get of the space on the top and bottom of the grid, and we've got it set to fill screen. The content is center aligned. I've got this image block dragged all the way to the right, so it's taking up the full right side of this section, and I've centered the content on the left side of the screen. Because on desktop, the number of columns all the way across the grid is 24, that means that on this side, we're working with 12 columns. Minus 2, we're now at 10 columns wide. And this row might be something around that tall. It's not taking up the full 20 that we set for the section, about 14. And on tablet, the font resizes, and it doesn't take up 10 columns by 14 rows. It doesn't take up all those cells anymore. So if we start to resize this and we get it to that 749 breakpoint, you can see what actually happens is it switches from a 24-column grid to an 8-column grid for mobile. And so this is like on the large side of mobile, but we can't get here by just switching to mobile view, unfortunately. So what's actually happening is it no longer needs all of those extra cells to display that content, and we just need to be able to move that up, right? And then we can move the image way up, and then we can reduce the number of rows in the section, and that would solve the problem, right? But we don't have tablet view. This is still under desktop. I've just resized the screen. So is that going to carry over when we switch over to mobile? Probably not, because we can't see it. So that was the major issue. But what I've noticed today as I've been making this tutorial is that as the screen resizes, sometimes, like right now, each cell gets taller because it's trying to accommodate all of that content in a narrower width as the screen gets smaller. Before, it was just creating like the same number of cells, the text was wrapping naturally, and then anything that was left over in that original 10 column by 14 row space was just extra space at the bottom, like this. It seems like Squarespace is on it. So I would definitely keep your eye on it. When you are designing new sections, make sure you go check on a mobile device if you have a tablet. If you don't, just open your website in a new window that you're not logged in, right click, click inspect, and then select this little device toggle so that you can set it to a tablet breakpoint and see if it reacts funny. Check the website on multiple other devices always. That's a good best practice, regardless of whether you're using Classic Editor or Fluid Engine. In this case, it's particularly useful to do that just so that you're aware of when Squarespace may or may not be fixing this issue. We believe that Squarespace will issue some sort of fix for that. And given what I've seen today in making this tutorial, I think that they're already looking into it or working on a permanent fix. So fingers crossed for that. As soon as I find out that it's officially fixed, Squarespace gives us the official word on that, then I will let you know. In the interim, just make sure you keep an eye on it and make sure you check that mobile view to do what you can to keep that kind of problem from happening. Something else you might be looking for is the full screen height sections. That's something 7.1 has always had, and it might just be not very obvious in the new Fluid Engine editor because those section settings have changed a bit. Just click your edit section menu and, adjust your grid the way that you want. Make sure fill screen is toggled on, which I believe it is by default, but just make sure that it's green. If it's off, then it looks like that. Okay, so fill screen is on and height is set to large, and that actually fills the screen. Now, one thing that you'll notice is if the content itself is too tall, it still wants to put that extra padding on top and bottom of it. So you may need to adjust the heights of some of your elements in order to fit within the available space there. So let's pretend we don't hate the way that button looks. And we're also going to make these images a bit smaller. Then we're going to grab everything and drag it all up to the top of the grid, and we're going to remove those extra rows. By doing that, we have fit the content into the grid area, and it still has room for that extra padding on my particular screen. On mobile, well, it can't fit all the items in that area. So let's look at this section instead. This section is just 3 different blocks: image, text, button. If we wanted this section to take up the entire screen, we would go into Edit Section. Make sure you adjust the grid to how you like it. Make sure that the Fill Screen toggle is on. Change your height from whatever it is to large. And as long as your content fits within that window, let's just drag everything up a bit. There we go. As long as your content fits within the grid, it doesn't force in order to keep that extra space on top and bottom. Not only is this a full screen height, it's also large padding. And I wish that we could edit them individually, but right now we cannot. For the time being, when you select large, it will have a lot of padding on the top and bottom of the section content. You just need to be cognizant of how much height your section takes up within that, because anything taller than that will force the extra rows, and that edits the spacing down here, which makes the screen like 1 row higher than it needs to be, or potentially a lot more than that. So you just want to make sure that you're within that window, get rid of any extra spacing, and then just double check that it is actually top to bottom of your device. And then on mobile screens and tablet, it will be about as close as you can get. You could potentially in your site styles change the line spacing for this particular font and reduce some of that. So that's the no-code workaround for full screen height section for the time being. On Fluid Engine, one of the biggest things that is completely unfamiliar to all Squarespace users is the ability to edit the design on mobile screens using Classic Editor, prior to the release of Fluid Engine, we could never edit the mobile only design. So if it looked kind of funky when it rearranged responsively, there was really nothing that we could do about that unless we added some custom code. But with Fluid Engine, that's luckily changed. You might have seen something floating around the internet that said there was some big accessibility issue, but I think that Squarespace has already addressed this. What was actually happening is on the mobile editor, everything is added in the order that the block was added to the page. Let's just show you what that actually looks like. We'll do a blank section and we'll add an image. And we'll just pick something from the Unsplash library for the time being. That seems like a good fluid example. Okay, so we have our image. Actually, let's make that fill. And we're going to add our text. And then we're going to add a button. So we've just recreated the collage layout since that's no longer available as a default setting for image blocks. I don't know if you've noticed that, but under design, that card layout, stack layout, poster layout, all of those are gone because we can recreate them ourselves now. I actually still want Squarespace to have that just because it makes things faster, but you know, agree to disagree, I guess. Maybe they'll bring it back after we shout loud enough. But for the time being, we've just recreated the collage block for the image. If we look at this on mobile, notice the little blue dot. It's letting us know, hey, we've got changes on mobile. We need to go look at that. So let's take a look. It's not actually that bad. So if you wanted maybe the image to go full width and so we grab the button, move it up, and it actually looks okay. The thing that you need to remember is that reordering them on mobile is different than reordering them on desktop. You do have to do both, and they do order themselves in the order that you added them in the first place. So if, for example, on desktop we added the button and then we added the text block, on mobile it would display the image and then the button and then the text block. You'll be able to switch into mobile view and reorder those in here. What it used to do is retain that kind of weird mobile reordering in the actual code. And the problem had been that each element was tagged with a number that represented the order it was added in. So this was number 1, this was number 2, and this was number 3. But if they were visually out of order, it still maintained that ordering system that the Fluid editor had applied. And so for screen readers, for the visually impaired, it was actually reading it in the wrong order, even though visually we were able to go back in and change it. But it seems that they have fixed this. So if you see that anywhere, don't assume that it's still true. That's something that Squarespace seems to have fixed. So when they give everybody the final word on that, I'll announce it. But for the time being, I would not worry about that particular issue anymore. You may have noticed when you're using Fluid Engine that the grid does not go all the way to the edge. So even if you go into your section settings and you change the grid to remove all the spacing and you switch from small all the way down to 1, so get as little spacing on the outer edges of that grid as possible, you still have this extra here. Now you'll have noticed too that you can drag things to the edge despite that. But in an example like this one down here where we have a split screen section, we've got the image edge to edge from the center of the section all the way to the edge of the screen, and then we've dragged the height of the image all the way to the top and bottom of the section, so it will appear as close as we can get without code to a split screen layout. The problem is that if you have content over here, it's a little harder to get that to center within the section. We notice we have one empty column on the left and one empty column on the right, but the problem is there's this extra space that's not being accounted for in the grid. So this section is double the width away from the edge than this one. Now you could potentially make the text box one more tall and reduce the width, and that would help take care of that problem. But then you have another problem. If the button is now too close for comfort for you, that's just a little bit too close for me, you would have to increase the number of rows in the section and then basically drag the button down so that it can be a little bit further away. If that's not a good solution for you and you just want the grid to go all the way to the edge, the full width of this section, right now, the only solution to this is to add a snippet of CSS to basically control that, and it is per section. So then the next question is, how in the world do you target the section by itself without affecting all of these others that may be okay without it? So the quickest way to answer that question is to download Heather Tovey's free Chrome extension, which is called Squarespace ID Finder. If you click that here, it turns on and it looks through the code and it finds all the IDs. So this is the block ID for that text block, that's the block ID for that button, and this is the section ID for the entire section and all the contents inside. So if I click that and turn on the extension, all I have to do is click on the ID that I want to copy and it copies to my clipboard automatically. And then all you have to do is replace the placeholder with the section ID you just copied right here. Keep in mind, this only applies to that section. So if you need multiple sections applied, you could, in theory, just add a comma and add another section ID and paste it in. But I will say that particular method does make it a little bit hard to go back in later and figure out which section is which section. So it's probably a little bit better to do that as little as possible. Once that's applied, let's take a look at what that actually does. Now if I turn on the grid, in that section you'll notice that the grid goes all the way to the left and all the way to the right. So this is a full width section. We've gotten the section settings as small as we can go, and you probably have noticed that there is a little bit of color space for that where you can see the background right above that image and right below it. That's as little as we can go without adjusting that in the code. So if you do this method, it might be easiest to make sure that that section and that section is this colored so that you don't notice that. So that helps you figure out how to more easily adjust and center content within that left-hand side if that code snippet is plugged in. Yeah, so now it's centered on this left side a little bit better. Right now, that's the only workaround that we have. If Squarespace changes that, then I'll make sure to let you know in the future, but that is the solution for the time being. If you understandably get frustrated with Fluid Engine while Squarespace keeps making little tweaks behind the scenes, even when I've been recording this tutorial, I've experienced quite a few crashes on my own, and you want to stick with Classic Editor at least until they get all of these little bugs and crashes and weirdness ironed out. These are a few ways that you can make sure that you have continued access to Classic Editor. First and foremost, there are a few sections and page types that will retain the same editor that we're used to, and those are going to be your list sections, which is going to look like these with the I. Those are our list sections. These sections let you quickly add content and items and switch out. So it's not a classic editor. It's not a Fluid Engine editor. That's the one that gives you the option to edit your content over here in the menu, which I know that's confusing because now we have three editors, right? We have the classic editor, and we have this editor, and then we also have Fluid Engine. This one's staying the same. You can't actually drag these around. That's the same as it was before. One of the others is one of the galleries. So if you go into Fluid Engine and you click images, any of the image gallery areas that have that eye, those are gallery sections. And also we're not using an editor on page. We're again editing the content from the settings menu. So that is list sections like that one. They come in several different layouts, whether accessible from the Fluid Engine section or from Classic Editor in here. So that's list, any of these, just look for the eye, and any of the gallery layouts, again, looking for the eye. So all of those will be the same. Outside of page sections, we have several different pages that do not use Fluid Engine. So in event descriptions, that's the entry for that event. Inside the description area, this is still going to use Classic Editor, at least for the time being. Squarespace has said this is going to continue to use Classic Editor. The same thing for blog posts. Inside the actual blog post content, we're still using Classic Editor. The last one is inside a shop. All of the products, if you go into edit mode, under the additional information where you can put more data for the product type and what it is and what it does and how to use it and all of the things, this section also uses Classic Editor. That, to my knowledge, will not be changing over to Fluid anytime soon. So those are the areas of your website that will continue to use Classic Editor. And if that scares you and you're not ready to jump over to the Fluid Engine bandwagon yet, I hear you. I'm not either. The best workaround that I can think of at this time is to go ahead and create for yourself a page full of pre-made layouts that use Classic Editor. The way that this will work essentially is you just create a new blank page. And once you have that page created, you go into edit, you add a new section, and it completely ignore all of these. Scroll all the way down to the bottom of the menu, click that looking for sections built with our Classic Editor. Why, yes, I am. Click that. From here, anything that you select in this menu will be Classic Editor. So just find one that you want to have continued access to, keeping in mind that anything with the eye is a different editor entirely. It's not related to Fluid or Classic, so you won't need to save access to that. I would start with any kind of headline combination that you want to hold on to. Specifically, text is also usually a good one. Columns is always a good one to hang on to. Add that section, and now you have that one. You can save your change in between if you want to. Scroll back down, because again, we're in Fluid section picker. So click that. Now you're back in Classic Editor sections as titled at the top. You can go back into text and select something different if you want. Let's go into contact. We're going to select that one. So we have a contact page layout if we want it. Go back into the section picker. Scroll all the way down. You're going to have to do this for every new section that you add because by default they want you to use Fluid Engine. So if you're not wanting to do that, you've got to scroll all the way down as long as this is here. Click that section, click some kind of layout, or create your own layouts. Let's do this one. That looks like a good one to hold on to. Let's pretend that this page has all the sections that I want to hang on to in Classic Editor. Okay, let's say 6 months from now, they finally take away that looking for Classic Editor sections link, and I can't get there anymore. You still have this in your website as something that's copyable. So they have told us anything that still uses Classic Editor will not be forced into Fluid Engine. And so all we have to do in order to keep access to our Classic Editor sections is to have something that we can duplicate. That's the reason we create this templates page. All you have to do next time you need one of those sections, unfortunately we can't move sections from between pages. So anytime you need one of those sections, you will have to duplicate the entire page and then just delete the sections that you no longer need and edit the remaining content. So just click the settings for that particular page, scroll down, staying on the General tab, and click Duplicate Page and Confirm. So it's going to make an exact copy of that page. All of these remain in Classic Editor sections. We'll just go into edit mode so you can see these are all Classic Editor. And we know that because it asks me to upgrade, and I don't want to upgrade. If this were going to be a new page, maybe a new services page I'm redesigning, then I just need to delete that because that's for the contact page. Maybe I want to keep that, but change the color. This was an image. Delete that one. We don't need that one. We don't need that one. We'll keep that. This needs to be a different color. There we go. We can keep that. Change that color. And get rid of that section. Keep that one. Keep that one. Get rid of that one. Okay, so let's save our changes and we have a brand new page. Now, what if I don't want this one to be at the very top? That's completely understandable. So that's when we probably want to either duplicate a section. So let's duplicate this one. Because it already existed, we can make a copy of it on this page, and then we just need to send it back to the top. To keep on, there we go. Now we're at the top. So this becomes the services heading. Make that heading 1. And all we need to do is get rid of the blocks that we don't need. Okay, so let's pretend that that's the hero area I will have on my services page. Then I scroll down and see the actual packages. And maybe that's a little too early to display that, so we need to move that one down, and then we can use this section instead to talk about what we're actually offering. And maybe move it down again, give a little bit of a step-by-step. And then we can display pricing, and to change things up, we'll probably want to change the color. Give them some highlights, maybe some portfolio examples, some more details. You could also use this section to display your packages and pricing if it's really simple. Some more highlights, maybe some testimonials, and some FAQs for working with you on this type of project. That is what I would suggest for continued access to Classic Editor. Again, you're not going to be able to add Classic Editor sections to any page and duplicate it onto a different page. But as long as you have access to that one page with all Classic Editor sections, you can duplicate that page and edit the copy and keep that template pack intact. And that will give you continued access to Classic Editor, even if they have removed this little hyperlink down here, which I do expect them to do. We just don't have a firm timeline on that yet. I would imagine we have at least 6 months before this part disappears. So as long as you make that template pack page before that 6-month period is up, then you'll have continued access. Well, that's all I've got for you today. They are making changes every second, it seems, so keep checking back because I will be announcing changes as I find them myself, so you can keep up with what Squarespace is doing on Fluid. And until next time, have fun!